What is good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Junkyard podcast. I am your host, Junkyard James. With me is, like always, the man with the apple cider, K-Dog. How's it going, my friend?
Good evening, sir. Can you hear me just fine?
You're good. I can hear you.
Good. Yes. So it's April. It's Carolina. I shouldn't even been eating a jacket, but here we are. It is what it is. We're fine. I will say that this show should be very interesting. Backed by popular demand, because evidently some people watched our appearance, our cameo on the Slap and Meat Wrestling podcast this past week, and noticed that I didn't have a certain beverage with me, as the man is experiencing network disruption. I may have to refresh my screen the 1 minute that I'm here. Backed by popular demand, the Junkyard Apple Cider has made its return. You're welcome to those in the Discord that noticed it. Hey, there's the man. He's back.
Hey.
Welcome back.
What's up?
Hey.
Always, like always.
I rough. But yeah, popular demand is our Junkyard Apple Cider, the official drink of the Junkyard Media Group and the Beyond the Junkyard podcast. So here we are, back in live and living color. The drink's back. We're back. Let's have a show.
Yeah, let's have a show. And what a show we have. But before we jump into the main topics, let's kind of break down some of the housekeeping. As always, go to the website on the bottom there, junkyardmediagroup.com. It is your one-stop location to find everything Junkyard Media Group. You can find all the past episodes of this podcast. You can find all of the past episodes of the Slapping Meat Wrestling podcast, which, we were on there on Tuesday. You should be sure to check out our WrestleMania predictions. That was a quite interesting show, and we appreciate the Meat Slappers for letting us join on Tuesday. But we got a big show coming up at the end of the month. It's not going to be a wrestling show. It's going to be a live stream of the NFL draft, which, to be honest, I wasn't really going to care that much about it, because I thought, the Bills are going to be really good this year. Well, all of that stuff is. And then we had a trainer number one wide receiver. So that was interesting. So we'll see what happens and all of that at the end of the month, the 25th, I believe. We will do the live stream instead of the wrestling show that Thursday. So be sure to tune in there. And then this weekend is WrestleMania. It's your last oppo to get some WrestleMania merch using the link in the description before WrestleMania. Be sure to click that, support the podcast while getting your Cody shirt. I don't know why you would. He's going to lose again. But anyways, let's jump into this bitch. So because of the intensity of the main topic, we're going to change up a little bit the order of how this show is going to be run. Typically, we do our push, bench, fire at the end. We're going to start with that today, and we'll get into that before we jump into everything else. Alrighty, and for this week's push, bench, fire, we're going back to the early 2000s. We have TNA AJ Styles. We have ROH Tyler Black. And 2003 Brock Lesnar. I'm going to let you go first push bench fire. Your turn, my friend. I believe you are muted, my friend.
For whatever reason, I forgot to unmute myself. There we go. Now we're back. I am going to fire Tyler Black. Just while he was a very good in-ring competitor in ROH and was honing his craft before he jumped over to WWE. I'm more inclined with ROH with Samoa Joe, Daniel, CM Roderick Strong, Adam Cole, those kind of guys. Tyler Black, for the reason I know that he was big and he was a prominent player. I never really got into him in ROH, so I'm gonna have to fire him. Man, this is a tough one. I love AJ Styles. That's probably one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I'm gonna have to bench him though. I'm gonna have to push Brock Lesnar. When you're talking 2002 Brock Lesnar, 2003 Brock Lesnar, I mean, I think that guy was on the trajectory of epic proportions. I don't know if I could compare it to a certain kind of level, but I definitely think a better level than Bret Hart in the mid-90s. I think that Brock just had the aura of literally the next big thing with Paul Heyman as his agent. And while he wasn't the best on the mic, he was just something a little bit different. He was a mix kind of a Goldberg, Stone Cold, brawler, powerhouse guy. One that I think people were just in awe of his athleticism, power, his strength. He was green for sure. And you saw the rawness in him, but you saw the trajectory he was on to being literally the next big thing, and did become that. But yeah, that'd be my push bench fire.
Oof. So this was actually difficult for me because I wasn't a really big pro wrestling fan at this point in time. And so when I kind of took a different approach to this than maybe some other people. And so for that reason, I have to I'm going to start with my bench, and it's going to be Tyler Black. And this was why. Without Tyler Black, and as big as he was, he eventually never would become Seth Rollins. And so if obviously I'm looking at this from hindsight as 2020, well, if he never became Seth Rollins, how many storylines would that affect? Without Seth Rollins, do we get the Shield? Do we get Roman Reigns? Do we get... Essentially, without Roman Reigns, we don't have our main event of WrestleMania this weekend. And so I don't think he was the biggest character of these three, but we got to keep him on the roster because I think he was a solid wrestler. He wasn't the main guy in ROH. You named Joe, Punk, others that were bigger. And then I would push, looking from the same view, I would push Brock Lesnar because without Brock Lesnar, we don't get big feuds with The Undertaker. The streak may have never been broken. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. And unfortunately, the loser on this one is AJ Styles. Not that he didn't have a great career, but I think if AJ Styles stayed AJ Styles in TNA and never came to WWE, his career would just be about as what it is currently. I honestly feel like WWE haven't treated AJ Styles all that great the last couple of years. He had like one or two good runs, but taking from the perspective of how much cutting or pushing someone from back in that era would have costed future storylines, I feel like if we didn't have 2003 Brock, in the future, the streak may never have been broken. And a lot of, Brock Lesnar from, I don't know, 2015 to 2017, I don't know, 18, was Roman Reigns, essentially. He was that part-time champion that would win the belt around Mania season and then lose it, take a bunch of time off, get it back. Maybe we should cut him, though, so we didn't have that disgusting run with him and Goldberg that we had to, for whatever reason, have. Which is why AEW exists, right? So we don't have to have that again. But anyways, yeah, let's push, bench, fire. I will push Brock, bench Black, and fire AJ Styles. Good comment here. Let's push this. DJ Wavy D, the man, the myth, the legend. He says, I feel like Brock and AJ hit their primes and stardom faster and earlier into their careers. I would agree. I think Tyler Black, Seth Rollins didn't really peak probably until he hit the WWE system. But yeah. All right, let's get going. Let's talk a little bit about last night's AEW Dynamite. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good show for the progression leading to Dynasty. There were some dull points, but we got a lot of storyline leading into matches into Dynasty. Thunder Rosa gets the #1 contendership match for Toni Storm's women's belt. I know you're so thrilled to have Thunder Rosa back in the main title picture. We get the Young Bucks beating Best Friends. They're now in the tag team finals, fighting the winner of Top Flight and FDR. But I think the biggest story coming out of that match was that Trent turned on his buddy, Orange Cassidy. And then Adam Copeland went scorched earth on the negative nonsense that's been going on this week. We'll talk about that kind of deeper in our main segment. What was your overall take on Dynamite?
I thought it was a solid show overall. I wouldn't say it was the best Dynamite ever. Wouldn't say it would be the worst at all. I thought it was a good show, and it definitely progressed a bunch of the stories leading into Dynasty. So some things that AEW has been trying to do over the last few weeks, I feel, especially with the debut of the new set and the graphics and the music, is trying different things. And we've gotten the kind of the Renee Paquette segment where the Okada and Kingston Continental Crown match, where they kind of did like a sideline reporter type of thing as Kingston was making his entrance to the ring. Some of the backstage interviews right as the match is about to start. And then we kind of got the women's segment last night between Willow, Statlander, and Mercedes, where they had the interview on the ramp or on the stage, but their backs were to the crowd, not them kind of looking at the camera down the ramp and kind of crowd. That was different. I kind of like that, though. And it goes to show you that AEW is trying different things, and they're trying to hone in on their production value, on their overall feel and presentation of the show. And I really enjoyed that. I really like the aspect of them trying to do different things and just kind of see what works, what doesn't work. I'm a fan of this Jericho Hook thing.
I hate
and I honestly think, and it's more so Hook than Jericho, honestly, because Jericho is trying to create this new guy with Hook, trying to give him more of a character, because really there's not been a character at all with Hook besides we know he's Taz's son, but he's just this rugged looking kid that has a meaningless championship in my opinion, and Jericho's trying to give him a creative character, and I applaud the effort to do that, and it's a good guy to learn from, is an ultimate storyteller like Jericho. I just working at the moment. I'm not saying kill the thing, because I feel like if Jericho really can't get this guy over, then I don't know if Hook will really ever become a character, to be honest with you. So much as I don't like it. I'm gonna give it some more time. I want to give it at least another month or two. It may seem like a lot of time, but I just think it's just gonna take that amount of time for this, whatever this story is, to fully develop, but also to give Hook some sort of a character evolvement.
Right.
It's just gonna take time. I'm trying to hit on all these points as quickly as possible, I guess. And if you need to break in between, let me know. But
yeah, so let's talk about Mercedes Moné, because she made a small segment. She doesn't have a match at Dynasty, but she says whoever wins the TBS title match against Julia Hart and Willow Nightingale, she gets first dibs at not Money in the Bank. That would have been a fun Double or nothing in Las Vegas, because what was her catchphrase there? Because Vegas is all about the Monet or something like that. I don't.
Vegas will be all about the money or something like that.
And so
I don't know how I feel about it, because for the longest time we've been conditioned in AEW to think that the rankings matter, the wins and losses matter. Yet here's this newcomer that's just all of a sudden getting a title shot and hasn't even wrestled a match yet. So not sure how I feel about that. I hope that I wouldn't say that she needs to earn her match, because she's gonna be the match. I just hope that she at least has a couple matches leading up to this, because I don't want her match to be literally the TV championship. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. While I'm glad it's for the TBS title and not the women's belt, it still feels weird to me.
Yeah, so I think the obvious maybe like assumption would be Willow is going to win, and we're just going to get that continuation of the feud between Willow Nightingale.
I turned on the camo ones. The camo
ones.
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll get the continuation of Nightingale versus Mercedes Moné, and
no, you're fine.
And yeah, I don't. I agree. I don't know how to feel about it. Yeah, I really wish that she would have some sort of match with somebody to get the ring rust off, but I guess we'll have to see what it leads up to in May. And yeah, so Mercedes Moné essentially gets the number one title shot. I think, for the love of God, I guess I have to agree with the guy for once. Bully Ray, I think, said something during the show that she hasn't stepped foot in the ring and she just gets a title match. And like you said, I thought the rankings matter. They said they were bringing the rankings back, and they've been really inconsistent at releasing those ever since they said they were coming back. But she's in contention, and she hasn't really done anything in ring, so it just kind of feels a little bit awkward, that she gets some sort of title shot. And it kind of also feels like we're giving away the story at Dynasty that Willow's going to win. But
yeah, I would agree with that. I enjoyed the Ospreay Hobbs match. That was very good. The Archer Danielson match was actually better than I thought it would be. The Adam Copeland promo was a good kind of a rah-rah type of speech to kind of reinvigorate the theme of AEW and what it's all about. So I liked it. It did its job. But I'll tell you what, the final segment of the night with the contract signing, yeah, that was.
If you were not excited for that match, that contract signing. So I don't know, maybe it's just wrestling stereotype. Every time you see a contract signing, someone's going through the table, and someone went through the table, but there was so much that went on that before Swerve went through the table that if you didn't get goosebumps, if that didn't get you excited for the title match at Dynasty between Joe and Swerve, I don't know what will, because that was a great segment. Joe no selling, being choked out by the chain, and then taking the chain and beating the ever living shit out of Swerve, cutting him open. Swerve signing the contract with his own blood. It's like a perfect level of like gruesome that it wasn't like completely overboard. It wasn't like Adam Hangman Page drinking Swerve's blood. But it was just enough to like get the point across. Perfect segment.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the involvement of Revolution, how potentially Hangman was not going to be in that triple threat match, and I'm like, there's not enough for me to care about Swerve and Joe, and I'm glad that they did the triple threat, and it's almost as if they set a foreshadow of, hey, guess what? We're probably going to do Swerve and Joe at the next pay-per-view. We're going to make this story make sense. We got to bring some intensity and actual believability to the storyline, and they did a great job with that last night. It makes you want to see that match. It makes it as if Joe is going to beat the shit out of Swerve, but Swerve is welcoming that and wants to, show Joe that he can go beyond regular limits to try to dethrone him to win the world title. So very much looking forward to that match now, and they did a really good job last night with that for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of leads us to the title of this episode, The Demise of Fragile Phil. I don't know if you I don't know if you watched the entirety of his interview with Ariel Helwani, MMA Hour. I think it was Sunday or Monday. I can't remember what day it was that came out. But I listened to it. And without getting into super specifics about content, the overall opinion I got out of CM Punk was he came across as the narcissistic ex-boyfriend who is just trying to make their ex seem like they did everything wrong. And it wasn't necessarily that I think that he was lying. I think CM Punk told his truth, and he's allowed to tell his truth. But what he said, the way he said things, makes me think that he's coming across this with like he's just the way I put it in the Discord, that he's just a fragile cunt waffle. Like I don't understand why he had such bad feelings about a company that gave him shot after shot after shot. And he said a couple things that stood out to me. Was he was like, well, Tony Khan isn't a real boss. That's not a real company, but it is. Tony Khan is a real boss. He runs multiple businesses, multiple sports companies, and he's doing pretty damn well. And I think what really irritated me was when he was talking about the All Out segment with Jack Perry. He said, well, I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody out. But you did something wrong. You choked a man out. Backstage, before your match, you should probably face the consequences of it. And like, where does personal responsibility end and begin? Where's that line? But it's never his fault. He never does anything wrong. And yet he makes it sound like he's the victim when people go on social media and complain about him being just a fragile mark. And I'll let you share your opinions and what you got to say.
Yeah, so I listened to kind of in splits at first, and then I actually went back and watched it in preparation of this segment today. And I kind of did a little bit of a throwback for especially for those that even may have watched our Colin Audibles podcast from last year, where a lot of notes, a lot of notes is what we would take. And I did that for this. I went back and watched it and kind of looked at different time points on what he said and what I take issue with some of them. So I love the fact that he's still referring to WWE as his home. I mean, it's being truth, the IWA and either Iowa or Illinois, that would be his home, or ROH, or even NA, or whatever works. I found it interesting that he had a no non-compete clause, and I wonder if AEW has that, or if they don't even have that at all, or what it may be, or if it's different for different people. I wonder how that looks. So I think he mentioned that with the conversation with Nick Khan, if Nick had known that he didn't have a non-compete clause, they would have contacted him at the 1st of September or October, and it would have been a lot sooner. But I thought it was interesting. So I love it how around the 9:50 mark of the interview, Punk said that him and Triple H are men, and they can talk about things, and they can bury the hatchet. Yet he goes into press conferences and he goes online and he unloads on people. I think is pretty laughable. And circle that goes to press conferences and stuff like that. That'll happen a little bit later. They kind of hit on over the 14:30 mark into the interview where he went to Chicago for a Raw while under contract with AEW. I think it was in May of 2023. He said that people felt betrayed, that he was a betrayer, he was a traitor. He said that he got a text from his friend Bailey, and that's why he went to the show in the first place. And he talked with a few people really quickly, and he got asked to leave. I love the fact that he's best friends and has a lot of friends with girls. It's not that it's totally wrong, but I swear to the Lord above,
right?
The man.
And you see all of his social media posts. He's taking selfies with the NXT women's locker room.
All these girls. It's weird.
His friend is Bailey, and that's great. Men can have relationships with females that are platonic, but let's just stop at that moment, that meeting on May when he went to the Raw in Chicago. To act like he just went there because he was just asked on a whim, hey, you should come to Chicago and to Raw. We have a show here. It is my belief that it was at that point where he realized it wasn't going to work in AEW. And he was trying to get his job back. This whole thing, Vince kicked me out. Like, maybe he did, but maybe it's just simply because you can't have contracted AEW wrestlers backstage. And if the press were to get out, like, that's a bad thing. But I have a feeling it was at that moment that they started putting a plan together to get CM Punk back into WWE. Because it wasn't, but just months later that the incident happened in London. It's just the timing is all weird to me.
Yeah, and that's a great point to look at. And I know that he went to a TNA show in Chicago as well. I believe he was under contract with AEW too. And he says that any time that there's a show in Chicago and his friends ask him to go, he's going to go. I halfway believe that. I half don't.
I mean, he hadn't been going the past several years prior.
Correct. And when exactly were you friends with Bailey? Because WWE has come to Chicago in 2015, 18, 19, 21, 22, and just all of a sudden you came in 23. Interesting. It's probably me diving too much into the weeds, but I thought it was kind of interesting how around the 20-minute, 30-second mark when he talked about reactions backstage after returning at Survivor Series, that everybody was high-fiving him, there was hugs, there was cameras in his face, and people kissing him on the mouth. And he clearly stated, and you can go back and listen to it, that he said, people high-fiving, hugging, people kissing me on the mouth. And I'm like, okay, how many people are kissing you on the mouth, first of all? I think that's kind of weird. Kind comment. Hopefully that was more of a joking just because of the jubilation of the moment that he was back and people were reacting to it in a positive manner, that it was just a sly of a comment in the moment. It's a little bit of a moment. Fast forward a little bit, about 4 minutes later, in the 27-minute mark, he mentioned that he was working out at the gym at Titan Towers, and someone told him that he needed to get off while he was working out because Vince doesn't like people talking on the phone while they're in the gym. And he was like, "Oh, okay, sure." So he's okay with someone telling him to get off the phone, and apparently he was on the phone with Nick Khan in Titan Towers while he's working out. Suspicious, but whatever. But he's okay with somebody telling him to get off the phone while at WWE headquarters working out, because Vince doesn't like people doing that, but yet makes a huge deal about the weird vibes in locker rooms before he left AEW, about how he was never welcome to. He was always having these had to look over his shoulder type of things, and I'm like, are you okay with somebody just telling you off the phone because Vince doesn't like it? They really don't get into the AEW until about 40 minutes into the interview. I see a lot of people commenting on social media that the interview was all about AEW, and it wasn't. A lot of it was, but it really wasn't until the 40-minute mark of this almost 2-hour conversation, that they dive into the AEW stuff. So it was dominated by the AEW stuff, maybe more so because of the controversies that happened there, but the entire conversation was not solely about AEW. But I do find it funny that this whole WrestleMania week, Ariel has had these interviews, and the majority of these interviews are about AEW.
I was going to make that point later on. I was going to let you finish. But how many times has Ariel Helwani had an interview? I can name CM Punk. He had Cody Rhodes on the show, asked him about CM Punk's comments, and I think he was trying to bait him into like agreeing with CM Punk to try to further push AEW down the drain. He had Josh Barnett on the show, asking him about his time in AEW, trying to get a negative reaction. And it's like CM Punk's the only one that took the bait. And I think that's the biggest thing, is this was an issue of who interviewed Punk. Was a guy who already had prior beef with Tony Khan. And then you have a guy who is being interviewed the week of WrestleMania, the biggest media event in wrestling history, like wrestling's calendar. Of course, it's going to be headline news. The timing is a little convenient because Punk hasn't had a non-disclosure clause about anything but the brawl-out incident several years ago. The whole Jack Perry incident, there's no non-disclosure agreement. So why is he waiting until this moment, right before WrestleMania, on a podcast with the host who already has a prior beef with AEW to shit talk a company that a lot of the reasons that there's a lot of drama were because he entered the company?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and just an absolutely weird way of how that whole thing went down. So one thing that I found, something that I kind of compare it to, is that I feel like this whole interview thing was very comparative to his interview with Cole Cabana back in 2014 after he left WWE. And it was a tell-all interview. It was his first real public interview since that fallout. And it happened right around Survivor Series weekend, right before Sting debuted in WWE, of all things. But during the whole authority angle with Cena and Ziggler and Ryback and all that stuff, and WWE was trying to turn the corner from the whole Rock and Cena thing, and they had the upcoming the fall of WrestleMania 30, and then starting the WrestleMania season for 2015, and yet Punk dropped that podcast with Cabana then. And I kind of compare this the same way. It's a tell-all interview about his time with AEW, and it just happened to be during the biggest week of WWE's live event calendar, but also the biggest event wrestling on the wrestling calendar of the year. So yeah, definitely weird timing for sure. Yeah, he talked about the All in London thing and said that he forgot about it. Obviously, trying to be funny. I think he literally tries to forget about it because it was such a negative thing that happened. And then about the 41-45 mark, he said he took offense to Jack Perry's comment about the real glass, go cry about it, but said he took offense to that because of the whole, apparently, while he thought that the separate brands for Dynamite and Collision was a bad idea, he wanted Collision to be a ticket seller, higher rated show on TV. If they went to a same market that they had before, he wanted to try to outsell that previous show by one ticket, things like that. Try to be the leader of the show, apparently. And Tony Schiavone said during catering he needed to go backstage and talk to Jack Perry about trying to break this window of a rental car for a segment leading into All in London. And apparently Jack Perry cussed out all these people and said no. Punk was like, you need to stop, don't do this, and that. And apparently Jack Perry, said, okay, whatever. And then he made it all in London. So he took offense with that. But literally maybe 2 minutes before that, he said, business is business, baby. Let's make money. Especially when it came to different people on the roster that he could potentially face, like Randy Orton, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns. Business is business. Let's make some money. But yet he took offense with somebody's comment, and instead of going up to him and saying, hey, you know what? Let's make this into an angle. Maybe we can make some money out of this. No, took offense to it. If he didn't make a big deal at All In, maybe him and Jack could have made some money. I don't know. It just didn't sit well with him when he said that. Like you said before, he said this plenty of times in the interview that he kept saying AEW is not a real business. They weren't in it to sell merchandise, to make money from gate revenue, from TV ratings, from market standpoints, and yet it was on the card that sold 81,035 tickets and one of the, if not the highest attended wrestling show of all time. But yet they're not in the market to make money. Didn't they just sell out Revolution 16,000 people?
For a company who's just in there to sell merch and not tickets, I mean, they're doing a fairly bad job at their key demographic.
Listen, 4.5 years ago, this company was just a T-shirt company, and yet here we are. So, I mean, I think they're doing pretty good for a T-shirt company.
And that sly comment he made, I think Ari asked him about All in London, like how many people showed up, and he said, "Oh no, you have to check the turnstile count."
Yeah. Do the same thing at WrestleMania. We don't need the 70,000 BS number when it's literally like 20,000 less than that. Maybe 10. So. Let's see what else that I really took. This was one that I got really interested on. That I've listened to this interview twice and I still haven't found the answer to it. 43-minute mark. He says AEW wasn't what he was told or sold on. He had made that clear that whatever he was told, however Tony Khan sold him on to come to AEW, he was never. It wasn't what he was told or what he was sold on. But he never once got into what he was told or how he was sold on coming to AEW. Fascinating stuff, how you can make that claim, right, but you don't yet bring into the light of what was it that you were sold on, that you're going to make money.
Right. Well, all he said about it was that he was sold that it was going to be an alternative, which it is. It's an alternative. Like, right. What else is there? It's a different show on a different network from a different company. That is literally the definition of alternative. So it's exactly what AEW is trying to push.
Right. An hour mark. Remember how I said kind of me dissecting this about the whole press conference thing, how he goes into press conferences and unloads on people, has no problem doing that. In the hour mark, he says that scrums, media scrums, press conferences, whatever, they're dumb, they're cringe. Yet he just did a WrestleMania press conference in Vegas, useless, kind of pointless event. He's been on panels. He's done scrums with WWE already, and still he doesn't seem to care. So it's amazing how the narrative changes when he kind of
Scrums are
joins
so
the.
bad that every
Yeah.
every pay-per-view in WWE has had a media scrum since he's been there, and he's been a part of it.
Correct. Yeah. I want to make sure that they understood that. 7 minutes into the hour of the conversation, so 1 hour and 7 minutes, says that I never do anything that exposes the business. I know where the line is and where to toe it.
Except when he called Hunter Hearst Helmsley Paul on live television.
Yeah. We broke the fourth wall during the pipe bomb promo in Vegas in 2011. Saying, "Hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing?" Talking about his friends that were fired and didn't deserve to be fired, and said he'll go back to New Japan or he'll go to ROH. That's kind of stepping over the boundaries, but it doesn't expose the business. He knows where the line is. About 10 minutes later, he names his friends in AEW. Then he stops and says, I don't want to name anybody else that are my friends, so that way I further punish them for being his friends. Now, what exactly does that mean? Is he joking, or is he saying that his friends in AEW are going to be punished by AEW simply for being Punk's friends? Because the latter is not a thing at all. Darby Allin hasn't gotten punished. Sting obviously didn't get punished. FTR hasn't gotten punished.
Brody King hasn't gotten punished.
Brody King, the House of Black, they haven't been booked greatly, but I don't think it's because they're being punished.
Right.
So I'm hoping that was more so of a joke than him being, because I think that was just an asshole that he made. This whole time he says that he's too old for this shit. He's too old for the backstage drama, for the high school BS. Explains this a lot during the interview. Now, 32 minutes into the conversation, he says he won't talk to Colt Cabana without lawyers present, but he claimed earlier that he's too old for all this stuff. He's too old for the pettiness, for the drama, but yet he won't talk to the lawyers. Now, if you listen to the All Out Scrum from 2022, he claims that he has receipts for things he bought, for this and that. Whatever the beef he has with Colt Cabana, we don't know, or at least I don't believe that. That's between them. And that's perfectly fine. But Colt Cabana literally came up to him, and he said that this was pre-scrum, before he made that blowout at All Out in 2020.
During the show, I think he said he was at the curtain watching a match.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know if it was at All Out. I don't know if it was at that show or if it was in AEW around that time. And Colt Cabana said, "Hey, listen, can we not make this awkward and talk?" So Colt Cabana literally came up to the guy to try to have a conversation, and Punk said, "No, I won't talk to you without the presence of lawyers." Come on, man. Like, you say you're too old for this pettiness and the drama and the BS. Yeah, you're feeding it. You're a hypocrite. Total hypocrite. He says, he says whatever people think about him, whatever, just leave him the F alone. Well, if you don't make these outlandish, ridiculous, somewhat comments, people are going to say these weird, crazy, maybe even nonsense and not true things about you.
Right.
But when you make these kind of hypocritical statements, that's why people attack you, and that's why people talk about him, because when you make these statements,
right, and for
back,
the, I know there's going to be a certain sect of the audience that are going to say, well, if he won't speak to Colt Cabana without lawyers, just get the lawyers. Well, Colt Cabana is humbling himself to a level of, I don't want to get lawyers involved. Let's talk about this man to man. Everything doesn't have to have lawyers involved. I think the funny part was when him and Jack Perry, I guess, had their big beef or whatever. He said he went to Tony Khan and his lawyers to tell them to solve it, or else he will. Like, why does he have to get lawyers involved in every situation? Can you not have a conversation man to man that you like? Are you that emotionally unstable that you can't have a conversation with somebody without blowing up? Like, that says more to me that he needs lawyers involved means that he can't control his own emotions.
Right. Now, when it comes to the non-disclosure agreements from All Out, the Brawl Out, I think it's going to be almost until the point that these guys are almost dead that we'll probably have any sort of confirmation as to what actually happened, or maybe years down the road when books are written, we'll finally have those kind of conversations.
And to Ari's credit, he pushed Punk a little bit to try and share some things, but and that was good. He didn't cut him slack there. Obviously, Punk probably can't share anything, and to the point that Punk said he was getting uncomfortable by him asking the questions, which that's just kind of a weird statement for him to say. He's just asking you questions. I don't know why you would feel uncomfortable about it, but yeah, I mean, good for him on there. I think Ari was a fair host. He wasn't cutting Punk slack. He was asking them pretty tough questions, but I think the whole interview could have waited until a less important period of time, or could have happened before WrestleMania.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because like we said, this entire WrestleMania week, it seems like it's been headlined by AEW's name being brought up because of interviews, and it's dominating headlines going into the biggest weekend of wrestling on the calendar year. I think that while we may never know what will happen at Brawl Out, what I would say regarding this whole thing is that the biggest thing that I want to know what happened is when, and this actually wasn't the Brawl Out, this was after All In London, where Tony Khan came out the very next week on Collision, I think, or at the actual pay-per-view, but he came out and said, I've never been more afraid of my life than that moment. I've gone to wrestling shows for 30 years, ECW shows, and I was never felt that threatened of my safety until that moment. And Punk says he doesn't do that. He didn't punch anybody. He didn't threaten to do anything, this or that. And, but, it makes you just wonder what exactly happened. I don't know if Tony would say that to save face, especially in Punk's hometown. Kind of a hard way to pinpoint that, because I think that was the day that he fired, and it was in Chicago, so he went out to tell the crowd. And I give kudos to Tony Khan for doing that, to owning up to what happened, to talking about it, and especially in CM Punk's hometown. He knows he's going to get booed. He knows he's going to get shit on, but yet he still went out there and said, "Hey guys, listen, this is why I felt this way." Now, like I said, whether or not he's telling the truth, I don't know if we'll ever know that. But it just seems like Punk didn't own up to any of his faults in this interview for whatever happened. You look at these things that have happened over the last 10 years, the fallout with WWE, the drama that he had in 2011 prior to this whole thing happening, where he was almost about to leave the company and then kind of finagled his way into the main event picture and made this whole real life thing happen into a storyline. So we take the 2011 factor, the walkout after the Rumble in 2014, the Colt Cabana fallout, the UFC fallouts, and then we get to the 3 times in AEW, the Brawl Out, All In, and any other backstage problems that have happened. Seems to be a theme. There seems to be a common denominator in all of this, and it's CM Punk.
Right.
For what I'm about to say, let actually you start with what you can say, because what I'm about to say may hurt feelings. So
what I was going to say is that I don't think Punk. I personally think he doesn't think he did anything wrong. That because he and I think you have to count into the fact that Bully Ray pipes in here and says he has had his run-in with Jack Perry as well, where he tried to introduce himself, and apparently Jack Perry kind of just brushed him to the side. We have these old school vets who want the wrestling business to be the same as it was in the 90s and early 2000s, where you have to earn your stripes, and you shouldn't be 20 years old and being able to be on TV and in the main title scene. And they don't respect this young generation of wrestling. And then we have the new guys who step in and say, I'm not going to take anybody's shit. I'm going to do what I think is best for myself. And if you don't like it, then you can kick rocks. And so I think Punk felt disrespected by Jack Perry, that he kind of did the opposite of what he told him like that he was going to do. And maybe Punk is in the right to feel that way, but it's the wrestling business. You can handle it a different way. You didn't have to choke him out in the back. You didn't have to do what you did with the Young Bucks. Like, I think all it comes down is CM Punk felt like he was being disrespected. Yet if you were so disrespected, why'd you come back? Why wouldn't you just sit at home and take your paycheck and let your contract run out? If it was such a miserable work environment, why'd you come back several times? Why didn't you say that you were still injured or you were still recovering? Because obviously we know Tony Khan up until recently wasn't a person that's going to fire wrestlers. Up until this week, this is the first set of releases that AEW has had in the company's history. And
I'll say the second. I think they had one before. The Stu Grayson got cut. This is not the second time it's been cut.
Well, his contract expired the first time, so he didn't cut. His contract just expired. So if there was mass cuts, like I think this was the first mass cut. Maybe they've released a couple people here and there, but mass cuts where there were multiple people, I think this is the first time that they've had multiple people fired on the same day. So obviously Tony Khan wasn't going to get him out of his deal. So why don't you just sit at home or sit in catering and not do anything? Why would you agree to be the lead guy for Collision if it was such a miserable work environment?
Apparently, from what he kept saying that Tony Khan wouldn't cut him.
All right, well, stay at home. No show. A couple of events, and he'll cut you. Don't show up.
You did it with WWE, so what's the difference?
Right. I mean, and so I think, again, it comes back to my prior statement. It feels like CM Punk felt like he was wronged by AEW, and he's just acting like a narcissistic boyfriend whose girlfriend just broke up with him because he's doing all this stuff. And he feels like, well, I have to point out everything that you did wrong and not take responsibility for my part in the action that caused the relationship to end. If he were to come out and say, I was part of the problem, and I admit that I was part of the problem, I think this would have just blown over. You have AEW fans like myself who have supported him from everything. I was like, I don't know what happened with the Bucks. Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. But it happened once, and it happened twice, and it happened a third time. And it's like, at what point do we find out that he's the issue? And I don't think we have had backstage drama since he's left. So he was the common denominator there.
And I find it funny that there's people that have probably the same wavelength of thinking like him, FTR, Brody King. I would even put Malachi Black on that same threshold. Maybe different guys, and they haven't left. They haven't caused backstage drama. They may have had some scuffles as far as arguments or tempers flaring a little bit, but they haven't gotten to fights or none of that stuff because they know how to have their conversations, talk to, and deal with it one-on-one, man-to-man, versus blowing up like Punk does. And I'll find it interesting if Punk goes to Saudi Arabia for any of these shows when he was one of the proponents of the fact that this was blood money, that WWE got the free $50 million or $10 million, whatever the money figure is, that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is paying WWE to run these couple of shows a year in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we all know that it's basically it's blood money. That's always been the running thing. And if he goes over there to perform at some point, and that would be the biggest wrong that I feel that he has proclaimed and yet would go back on his statement for. And it would just kind of further the hypocrisy that he has spewed. Comment that I was going to make is, Punk, his inspiration in wrestling was Bret Hart. And I'll tell you what, he's acting pretty damn close to what a Bret Hart person is. Like an Antonio Brown. Like unfortunately, I don't mean to say this, but honestly, like a Stephon Diggs. A guy that has been given everything in the world, and yet you still find ways to bitch and moan and complain, not get your way. If Stephon Diggs had literally, and I'm not going to go on a football rant here, but if Stephon Diggs came to the Buffalo Bills and said, hey, listen, I'm not happy here, you're not happy here, let's get out of this contract, trade me away, I want to win a Super Bowl, but maybe it's not here. It would suck. But you know what? Fine. Let's do right by you. Trade you to the Texans. Hopefully you get a fresh start. Good luck to you. And we'll recalibrate to hopefully make a run in the Super Bowl. Antonio Brown, same thing. Steelers and wherever the hell else he went, with the Jets or the Raiders, wherever he went. Tampa, yeah. And had opportunity after opportunities, got the ball targeted so many times, and yet still complained and had the infamous scene of what happened at halftime. Bret Hart. While Bret had some legitimate reasons for hating WWE, getting that 20-year contract in 96, and then all of a sudden got told a year later that we can't honor that. They cut him so he can go to WCW, and yet the WWE was still spending money, making a whole bunch of money. Had no problem signing people to contracts. Bret complained and, got screwed and all that stuff and trashed the name of WWE for years. Then he got treated pretty badly in WCW. And after the death of Owen, really, and then after his career-ending injury in 2000 or 99 with Goldberg, trashed on WCW and trashed on Goldberg. 10 years later, in 2006, he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame. 2010, he comes back to do his Bury the Hatchet segment with Shawn Michaels, and then he has his couple matches, one with Vince at WrestleMania 26, and then SummerSlam with the Nexus storyline with him and Team Cena. Yeah, that's honestly who I think it was. And the only reason why I said Stephon Diggs as a whole, the most recent thing that I could think of that kind of thing. He gets everything and still isn't happy. But Antonio Brown probably is a much better comparison. But then guess what? 2010, Bret comes back. All is forgiven. He's fine. Everything's great. I love WWE. I'm here. I'm back now with the guy that I hated and wanted to kill for years because of what he did to me and my family. And then 5-10 years later, we're back to trashing WWE again. It's like, dude, what are we doing here? And Punk's the same way. Left in 2014, had this big fallout with WWE, hated them. Come back in 2018 with Backstage, but didn't really work for WWE. Then goes AEW, and now that whole thing happens, and now he's trashing.
Goes to AEW. His first promo in AEW, he says, in 2005, I left pro wrestling, and now I'm back to pro wrestling because WWE isn't pro wrestling. And yet,
and he said that he kind of he fed into the niche of the audience. Okay, whatever you say, big man. Whatever you say. Right. Yeah, it's hard to feel bad for a guy and to be a fan of a guy when you go to different places and you still find and it's not the fact that you can't speak up when there's any kind of problems or there's some kind of differences. By all means, do that.
Right.
But do it in a respectful way. And the fact that he has this record of making deals and making a lot of noise for things that probably shouldn't be made a lot of noise of.
Right.
Thinks of himself as a martyr and the innocent victim and the innocent bystander in all of this, and then leaves after a few years, and then goes and shows up and seems all happy, joy, giddy. It's great. I'm happy.
Right. And so,
come on, man.
Let's transition to last night on Dynamite. Adam Copeland comes out, and he didn't directly address CM Punk, but we kind of could tell through, what he was talking about, that he was kind of referencing this. And Tony Khan, for whatever goddamn reason, is getting trashed on social media because, well, you can't even defend your own company. You can't make your own statement, do your own promos. But yet, anytime Tony Khan gets on social media to defend AEW, maybe Tony Khan should put his phone down and stop snorting coke. So which way do you want it? Do you want Tony Khan to defend his company and be martyred for that? Or do you want him to not say anything and let the wrestler say it in story mode? You can't have it both ways. And so the thing is when CM Punk leaves WWE again because he doesn't get what he wants, which I think he wants the main event of WrestleMania, and it probably will never happen. Does he trash them again? It's just like CM Punk, and you used the Stephon Diggs reference. I mean, it's a pretty good reference, to be honest with you. Makes all of this unnecessary drama. Stephon Diggs posts all of these cryptic posts on social media, starting drama every offseason. You could tell there was tension because, maybe he didn't get the ball enough, but yet his production didn't really match what he needed and from the regular season into the postseason. And yet we're supposed to feel sorry for the guy that he didn't get the ball in 700 times in the postseason when his productivity is not there, or we're supposed to feel sorry for Punk because he's not a top guy anymore. Like Tony Khan put a belt on him when he came back, allowed him to use this belt that technically wasn't a championship, and put it on Collision as the real AEW champion. And that was a legitimate storyline. And yet Punk comes out here and makes an ass of himself. And in a way, it kind of hindered the progression of Ricky Starks. Because Ricky Starks was...
It held back AEW as a whole.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I mean, if anybody in the world of pro wrestling, more so in the last 10, 15 years, that can have a real gripe and a real beat promotions he's worked in and could easily trash on him, and you know what? We could probably actually understand him and probably take a side on it. It would be Jon Moxley. Right. The guy, came up with the Shield, was the leader of the Shield for the most part, got broken up with the Shield, kind of became a little bit of a gimmicky type of guy with some of these weird matches and storylines. Won the world title for a month and a half, and then loses it and never world champion again in WWE. Left on bad terms. Comes to AEW. Debuts in their first ever show, Double or Nothing 2019. Becomes a mainstay of their roster. Wins the world title at Revolution 2020. Basically was the world champion during the whole pandemic, so most of his title run wasn't even in front of fans. Right. Loses the world title to Hangman, I believe. Whatever, not a problem. And then goes and finds the Blackpool Combat Club with William Regal, who only lasted there for 5 months. So there goes your manager. Has this feud with Punk. Or won the belt back. After Punk got hurt.
Right.
He won the world title. Punk comes back. And he loses the belt. Supposed to go on vacation. All Out happens. Yep. And so guess what, Moxley? I'm sorry, man. We have to postpone that vacation. We need you. You're the top dog in the company right now. We need to have you. We need to lean on you. What does Jon Moxley do? All right, man. I get you. And this is the guy that just has been recovering from alcohol addiction.
Right.
He went away for a couple months to battle that. Came back, whatever. Had to cancel his vacation, became the world champion, and lasted for a few more months as world champion, and carried this promotion again, and has just been featured in so many different roles over the past couple years, and has been such an MVP caliber talent for AEW. But currently have a gripe with roster, with the locker room, with the companies he's worked for, and he has said some things about WWE, but he's not gone to the level of a Bret Hart, of a CM Punk, where he's totally trashed him, says F you, whatever.
And then
just
you
does
look
his
at
job.
you look at CM Punk, and you look at when he left WWE. He left on his own terms. He left on bad terms, but he left on his own terms. He wasn't
Mhm.
forced to leave the company, and he left on his own. He quit. He quit on him, and he left. And then he disappears from pro wrestling for the good
7
part
years.
of 7 years. You take a look on the other side of this spectrum, and you see someone like Adam Copeland, who wrestling literally was taken from him. He had no choice but to retire. And for 9 years, the thing that he loved to do, and he kind of made this known in the promo, was taken away from him. And you take a look, and CM Punk is just like, he feels like he is entitled to a top spot because he is considered one of the greatest wrestlers of this generation. And so hand me what I believe I deserve. And you look at Copeland on the other hand, and he seems to just cherish every moment at whatever company he's in. He never downplayed WWE. At the promo, a guy booed when he said he grew up watching WWF, and he told him not to boo WWF because he likes pro wrestling. He understands that AEW is good for pro wrestling. And the one comment I think that pissed me off the most that Punk said was that guaranteed money ruined the industry. But yet,
guess who started that? Eric Bischoff.
Right.
Go back 30 years. This was all Eric Bischoff's fault. But yeah, not once did we blame Eric Bischoff, did we? We never even mentioned Eric Bischoff.
Well, and Punk benefited the most from guaranteed money because AEW was still paying him when he was hurt.
Yep. But they didn't pay for his surgery, right? They didn't pay for him check up on him. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. I mean, you got to have it one way or another.
My boss don't pick a doctor for me when I get hurt.
I pay for my own insurance, and it's up. I guess it's up to me and the insurance company to file the claim, go from there, and whatever I got to owe back, I have to pay. It sucks, but that's health insurance. It is what it is. I mean,
right. I mean, at least you get health insurance with AEW. I mean, WWE just kind of puts you in a cardboard box. But
and you have to find your own. And well, I think AEW still have to. I think I don't know if their benefits package comes with insurance. Mariah May on a Talk to Jericho mentioned that her and Harley Cameron had to go through all this stuff about insurance and whatnot, and some of the other international talent that had the same conversation. So I'm not 100% sure, but regardless, you kind of stole the next thing I was going to talk about, which is what Copeland mentioned with the WWF thing, and he was like, "You're missing the point, man. That's not the point, and that's not the point. You can like whatever you like, but if you're a fan of pro wrestling, you're a fan of pro wrestling." And I love that analogy from Adam Copeland. He has never once trashed WWE. Doesn't have any reason to. The guy made his living in the company. You could probably say there's a few things that he hated that he wished he could take back, that maybe he could have left on sour terms, but he didn't, because he didn't. He really enjoyed the company. He enjoyed his time there. He's thankful for everything that company's given him. It's made him an international star. It really has. And he thanked them for that. He has no hard feelings with WWE, and he will probably not have hard feelings with AEW because he said he's having more fun now than in his career than ever because of that creative freedom that he's able to have. Something he never really had in WWE. So it's just something different, but something new and exciting for him. But again, if you're a fan of pro wrestling, you're a fan of pro wrestling. You like what you like. You like what you don't like, what you don't have to spew hate. Bless you. You don't have to spew hate every 10 minutes because you don't like what you don't like. If you don't like it, you can criticize. Constructive criticism is one thing. Saying, you know what, I watched AEW. This is what I don't like. This is what I would like to see maybe with the company, and people can have a conversation about it. But just to go on and say this is the worst company ever, they're going to die in 2 years. They're shitty. No boss. Not a real business. Like, bro, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Go start your own promotion if you really feel that strongly. Go do it. What's stopping you?
Right. With that being said, let's transition to end this show here. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour about this, but let's close it up here with our Q&A in the Discord. We got some pretty good questions. We're going to first start with a DJ Wavy D question. He asks, are you still against AEW having a performance center? that wrestlers could just work out at or meet up at and work with each other. I'm gonna start this one. Yes, I don't think AEW needs a performance center. I think what they need to do is allow the wrestlers that are on their roster to actually wrestle. And so, if anything, I would bring back AEW Dark and some of the newer talent that maybe don't have enough experience under their belt. I'm putting them in real live matches, and this is just from my own personal experience with when training, is training when you have all the answers and it's not for an actual win or loss is one thing. You can take 300 jump shots in practice with nobody guarding you, but in the real game, can you make a shot? And so you can practice all you want in the performance center, but when the lights are on and the camera's going, can you actually do a match? And so I would bring back Dark, and I would put it back on YouTube, and I would give these wrestlers that aren't getting the time in ROH or the time in Collision or the time on Rampage or the time on Dynamite, and I would put them on Dark, and I would get them that experience so that they can get comfortable doing matches. You can train all you want. The Performance Center is great, but how many times have we seen a wrestler come through the Performance Center and absolutely shit the bed? Alexa Bliss went through 5 different gimmick changes at the Performance Center. And it was only until she worked with Blake and Murphy that she kind of hit it off. So how many times have we seen gimmicks fail? So the Performance Center isn't always 100 proof. I don't understand why people, if they had a Performance Center, these people can train and put them in a match. That's why Tony Khan allows them to wrestle indie shows, to get the experience, because the real live matches are what Tony Khan cares about, not necessarily gimmick or story, or that'll come with time. If you don't know how to wrestle and put on a match in front of a live crowd, you're never going to get to that point anyway in AEW.
I agree, but I they would benefit from some sort of a performance center. But I would echo what you said before. Let's have a performance center where they can train, hone their craft, because I think Jade Cargill would star and probably would still be with AEW if she had that time to practice more and in general, because AEW doesn't have the house shows. They have a very, very light schedule, so I would want to have a performance center at some point to kind of hone your craft. However, I would like I said, echo with what you said and have like an NXT type of thing, NXT level up type of thing, where we have a show on YouTube, or hell, put it on Max if that's the thing. Put it on a streaming platform to where they can still have they can wrestle in front of a live audience, but yet at the same time, be able to watch their matches back by YouTube or whatever the case may be, and for fans to still watch the progression and watch the growth happen. Yeah, that's what I would say with that.
I just feel like the reason I would bring Dark back is how many wrestlers got signed to AEW because of a match on AEW Dark, like Chris Statlander, Anna Jay. They all got contracts because of what they were able to show on an AEW Dark match.
Yep.
Next question. Oh, there's one question here that is a really good question. I shared that question with you earlier so that you had time to think about it. I'm trying to break down some of these other questions first. Wavy D also asked if we could book Adam Copeland's last 3 to 5 feuds to end his career. And I'm not a guy to fantasy book because I don't really you don't want me to book stuff. It would be very bland, basic stuff. I feel like at some point in time, we need to have Copeland and Christian Cage go out together as a tag team. I think that's just how you end it. And they both retire at the same time as a tag team. And it may not be just a tag team title opportunity like with Sting, but work it to some point to where Copeland, obviously he's fighting Brody King at some point. Or not Brody King, Malachi Black. At some point. So obviously they have this trios match at Dynasty. I think that leads to a singles match at Double or Nothing, or on a Collision or something at some point. Probably because Buddy Matthews' contract is actually up now. He's just kind of on a handshake deal, working through Dynasty with AEW. And I don't know if he'll re-sign with AEW. Probably not. I see him going back to his mommy in WWE. But I think we see Malachi Black as this next feud. I don't know if Malachi Black will take the belt from him, but at some point in time we get to a position to where, and maybe this is when Luchasaurus turns on him, Luchasaurus can be the heel, and then we can have a face Edge and Christian again. Though it's Christian and Copeland. I don't know what you would call them, the double C's. I don't know. And and they end their career together as a tag team. That would just kind of be the way that I would do it.
Yeah, I think you probably need to end his career with the tag team of him and Christian. In some ways, I wish that would have been his actual final feud and not the first one is him and Christian. But I think that they should definitely end their careers together, or at least Adam and ending his in-ring career with Christian. Love to see a program with Adam and MJF. Would love to see a program with the Adam and Adam, Copeland versus Cole.
Adam versus Adam.
Yeah, that's a lot of Adams. I think having Adam Cole versus Copeland would be a really great storyline way of thinking. They both have that same mindset and would really be able to do stuff. Same with him and MJF. Those would probably be the top I think of. There's probably a laundry list of people he could face, but just from those perspective, that would probably be my top three that I think could him and Adam Cole, him versus MJF, and then him and Christian teaming up. Maybe in that chronological order and finish up his career like that would be pretty cool.
If Edge and Copeland and Christian fight, then end their career with fighting tag teams like FTR, the Young Bucks, and the Lucha Bros, like three of the greatest tag teams in the world, like with one of the, I would say, greatest tag teams of the modern, or the previous generation, would be a cool way to kind of end their career there. I'll go to this question that I shared earlier. You just bought AEW from Tony Khan. You're now the boss. What changes and pushes are coming? Who are you releasing? So if you're the new guy in charge, the new CEO, that's not named Mercedes Moné, you're the actual CEO. You're the owner of AEW now. What are you doing to AEW day one?
Man, you shared me this question today, and I don't have a great answer yet.
All right, great, because I kind of have a pretty solid foundation on what I would do.
Tell me your idea, and then I'm going to shelve that question from next week for me when I have a little more time to think about it and really kind of plan out this. Come back to me next week with that, and I will have an answer for you. So I want to hear your thoughts, though.
So here's my thought process. I'm day one. This is what I'm doing. Minute one, I just bought the company. I'm going to Warner Brothers, and I'm saying, Rampage isn't working. Give me that hour on Friday to put ROH on television. And I'm putting ROH in that slot. You can call it ROH Rampage or whatever the hell you want to call it. But we're putting ROH on TV, on TBS or TNT. The next thing I'm doing is I'm taking a look at the rosters. And we're going to do a split. We're cutting the roster in thirds. We're going to have exclusive ROH wrestlers who wrestle on ROH, and that's it. They're not showing up randomly on Collision or on Dynamite. They're on ROH. We got our Dynamite wrestlers who show up just on Dynamite, and we get our wrestlers that show up on Collision just to be on Collision. Well, how are we going to determine who's on what show? We're going to have a draft. But we're not going to do like what WWE does, where it's just a random Monday Night Raw and they just randomly say, these 5 people are on Raw and these 5 people are on SmackDown. This is going to be a live event on like the AEW YouTube page where it's like the NFL draft. And obviously the rosters are predetermined on who goes where, but we're going to make it seem like it's real. And like I said earlier, I'm bringing back AEW Dark, and the wrestlers that don't get drafted to one of the 3 shows are going to be on Dark. And they're probably going to be the young talent that needs to improve on their skills and whatnot. And this draft will be a yearly thing. And so any free agent that is available at the time of the next draft will be available to be drafted. And so it's like an entry-level draft. And we're going to implement more sporting, like AEW's idea when they were first created was we're going to make this a sports-centric wrestling show. So could you imagine, let's just say Will Ospreay is going to battle on Collision against Adam Copeland next week. And right before his match, it gets announced that Will Ospreay has been traded to Ring of Honor. So now he can't wrestle this match, and the person he was traded for will take his place, and he was traded for like Konosuke Takeshita. And so now you have this wrestler who thinks he's wrestling Ospreay, but he actually has to fight Takeshita. And Ospreay shows up on another show. And so you can add these surprises. And AEW likes to add new wrestlers all the time. Why not wait until that draft every year to add all of your wrestlers that you're going to add for the year? So Mercedes Moné shows up at the draft instead of on a random Collision or a random Dynamite. And she gets drafted to a show. And Ospreay gets drafted to a show. And the Motor City Machine Guns get drafted to a show. Well, to make this make more sense with the drafting aspect, we have to have, I guess you could call them general managers. ROH, it's easy. He's basically the general manager, was the general manager at some point. Stokely Hathaway will run ROH. Dynamite would have Kenny Omega. That way, while he's healing up from whatever injuries that he still has, he can still have an on-air presence in the company. And then the Icon Sting will be the general manager of Collision. Sting still, I think, wants to be part of the wrestling business. He just doesn't want to wrestle. But it's a great opportunity to have a management title on Collision. And so you have that. The other changes I would make are we're having 12 pay-per-views every year, but each show gets 4 pay-per-views. We have 4 Dynamite pay-per-views, 4 Ring of Honor pay-per-views, and 4 Collision pay-per-views. And we're not going to have 4 straight Dynamite pay-per-views. They'll be split up throughout the year. With maybe 1 or 2 pay-per-views, you have the intermingling between one or the other. And then the last thing I'm doing is I'm rebranding the TBS and the TNT championships.